This is John Cola with GrowingYourGreens.com. I have another exciting episode for you. And, every episode I have is basically my life in my gardening lifestyle. I mean, I live a gardening lifestyle. Half my day or more sometimes are actually out in the garden after I'm finished with my things that I have to do and must do in life, because this is my joy, my pleasure. I like to be out in the garden, get some fresh air, and also build some muscles by carting some of these soils around and whatnot. So, what I'm doing today actually is I'm enriching my raised beds for the new upcoming season here, and I thought I'd share the process with you. Specifically I get, John, do you throw out the soil after every, season when you're growing? No, man, don't throw out your soil. The soil is the most important thing you got. As you can see behind me, the soil actually dips down, so I filled this up to the top, and over the season it just kind of compresses down, and earthworms are eating some of the organic matter, and it just compresses down. So I don't till it up. I don't like to till. What I do is I just add stuff to the top layer and kind of mix it in just a little bit, and try not to disturb any of the existing soil in there, to destroy the precious beneficial microbes and fungi and other alive elements in the soil. So I'm going to be adding new stuff. And another question I get a lot is, John, what do I add to my soil? So whether you're starting a new raised bed and filling it up, or whether you're adding to your raised bed, what I'm going to show you now is what I use, and you may want to use some or all of them. Some of these I'm experimenting with, but some are tried and true, and I definitely would recommend them, and I'll let you know which ones those are one by one. So let's see. So currently we'll start off with what I filled these beds with. What I filled these beds with here are basically a plant-derived compost, so it's actually from Sonoma Compost. It's primarily the Mallard Plus compost made from food scraps and yard waste and clippings from everybody in the county. This is OMRI certified for use in industrial production agriculture. In addition, I also have added at some different points biodynamic high test compost, which is Demeter certified or listed, also from Sonoma Compost, and that makes up probably like 99% of what's in here. I've also added things like rock dust, kelp powder, and some other things in the past. So what we're going to do is we're going to re-enrich for the new growing season. While yes, there's still lots of nutrition in the soil, I want my plants to have everything it needs. It's like if you go to a buffet, a smorgasbord, and there's all kinds of food in front of you, man, and you get to choose what you want to eat. Well, I want to build my soil and give everything and put everything in my soil so that the plants could choose what they want to absorb. If say you go to like a fast food place and they got three options, you got, I think actually In-N-Out burgers like this. You got a hamburger, a cheeseburger, and a French fries, and I don't think they sell much else there, maybe a Coke. You don't have too many choices, but imagine you go to the buffet, you have all these different things. So I like to just flood my soil with all organic nutrition that's going to encourage the beneficial microbes and bacteria and fungi in there, because they're the ones that really help break down some of these nutrition so that the plants can absorb it, and let the plants choose. So that's what I'm going to show you guys today, what I use. So let's start over on this side. What I like to do is I like to put all my different soil mediums in little buckets, and these are actually about 1 gallon recycled buckets that I pick up for free. This actually, I don't know what this had in it, has a label there. But different things, I get these from like a local health food store, that they get almond butter in some of these, bath salts in some of these, and they basically would normally throw these out or recycle them. I like to take them and reuse them. So I want to encourage you guys to always reuse instead of recycle. It's just smarter, and actually these buckets come in quite handy when I'm enriching my bed, because then I get to put one item in each bucket, and then I sprinkle it on uniformly to mix it in, and I'll show you that process. So I'm using the little buckets, and we got little buckets of all different cool stuff. So right here, what I have is the worm castings. So this is a worm gold worm castings, and in my estimation, these are some of the best worm castings. I mainly like these because they are not only worm castings, they're like 97% worm castings, and just a small percentage of the rock dust minerals, and also some kelp meal in there as well. So definitely really good quality worm castings. Also, they're very high in chitinase content, because these worms, unlike many worm castings, can't be fed, manures. These are fed vegetative stock. So when the castings have high chitinase content, which breaks down the chitin, and the insect shells like the aphids and the whiteflies have shells, exoskeletons that are made of chitin, and when they have the chitinase enzyme, it breaks down their shell. So it's like if you're an insect and you're eating that plant, it's like pouring acid on your skin. It's going to melt, and then guess what? They're going to go to somebody else's garden that didn't use the high quality, high chitinase worm castings. All worm castings are not created equal. Now, aside from the worm castings, I'm also adding my favorite thing, and if you don't use anything else, you want to definitely use this one at least minimally. This is the rock dust, and this is a really fine powder. This is the azomite rock dust, which I like so much. I also have used other rock dust in the past as well. Now, if you can't find a horticultural grade rock dust, because it can be very hard to find, if you go into any big box store, or even most local nurseries, you ask them for rock dust, they'll look at you like, huh? Or they'll say, oh, you mean ironite? No, not the same stuff, man. You want a wide spectrum ground up rock dust, basically, and most nurseries places won't have it. So check my past videos where I have a video on the lowest prices on rock dust delivered so that you guys can get it shipped directly to you at the lowest price I found. Other than that, you can go to a local rock and stone quarry, you know, that mine stuff out the ground, and you're gonna wanna get their rock dust, rock powder, or their finest grade material that's pretty much like a dust. This is actually literally a flour-like consistency, really fine like a powder. And we need this in a small, you know, powder form so that it's most available, bioavailable for the microbes, because microbes can't break down pebbles and things like that. So aside from the azomite rock dust powder, I also have some other rock dust powder that was sourced at a local farm. They have their own quarry here, and they get their own rock dust. And this is a lot more finer texture, but there is some fines in there too. Now you might be thinking, John, why are you adding 2 different rock dust, man? Isn't one enough? Well, you know, every different kind of rock, no matter where it's from, is going to have a different makeup of minerals. And so this one may have a lot of certain minerals, and this one may have other minerals. So I want to, put all the different kinds of rock dust that I could get as possible so that my plants have all the different minerals. And once again, they're in a smorgasbord, man, and they get to go to town and eat whatever they want, get nice and fat, because nice and fat plants equal nice and fat yields and more food for me to eat. So aside from the rock dust, I got the next one here, which is also another good source of trace minerals, because this is actually from the ocean. You can also use some things like ocean solution or C90 for your minerals, which I feed in later and foliar feed. These ones actually go in the soil. What this one is now, this is actually just the kelp meal. So actually, if you go to the health food store, you can actually buy kelp meal and sprinkle that on your food, and I recommend that as an excellent alternative to salt. It's much lower in sodium, but also has a lot of the other trace minerals in it. So it's good for us, and it's also good to put in our garden and supplement our soil with. Next, we have these 3 items right here, and these are the John and Bob's products. So let's see, I think this one we got the soil optimizer here, and basically some of these products are food for the microbes. Some of these are mild fertilizers, and actually the next one is the trace minerals and the microbes. So let's get into that one next. This is actually the John and Bob's product that I like the most. This is actually called Minerals and Microbes. It's once again rock dust trace minerals and the beneficial microbes that are going to help break those down and allow your plant to absorb them more effectively. This one's actually called the Nourish Biosol. And so on the John and Bob products, I'm currently experimenting. This is my first growing season using them. I've read up a lot and I've been testing them in small amounts, and I definitely agree with the whole principles of the John and Bob's, and so far I'm having good results, but I'm totally inconclusive at this point because I'm not really sure, because I haven't really used it a full growing season. The last bucket of stuff I got is this stuff right here. It's actually the Sonoma Compost Biochar. And biochar is 100% carbon. And if you've done any research, there's this soil called Terra Preta soil, really dark, rich soil, and they used to add the biochar to it. So I'm now starting to add the 100% carbon to my soil. That being said, you want to do biochar in moderation. You don't want to put too much biochar, because biochar charcoal, which is what this is used in air cleaners all the time. The charcoal will absorb odors and different things, so it'll also absorb the nutrition in your soil. But it's good to have there in any case, in my opinion. So I'm going to add just a little bit of biochar to this whole raised bed to inoculate my soil with some biochar to put some carbon back in my soil in a big way. And these items I put in small amounts, in 1-gallon buckets. And there's no really rhyme or method to how much I put in. I'm just like, okay, let's use a little bit of this, a little bit of that. It's almost like making elixir or something, and like the witch's brew, Some of the things I like to use more of, like I like to do a lot of rock dust, and especially depending on how much of that I have in inventory right now and how much I don't. I don't have a whole lot of kelp meal, and it tends to be very expensive, whereas I have a lot more rock dust. So I'll put a lot more rock dust and a little bit of kelp meal. I always recommend, if you don't know what you're doing, this is very important, read the label, read the directions. I'm not good for reading directions, but I kind of have the gardener intuition and kind of like know what I should be using. And I do kind of look at the labels to get some general guidelines before I just start throwing stuff in, because if you start throwing too much in, in general, more may not be always better, depending on what you're going to put in. I mean, I've grown in 50% rock dust before, and, I've grown in a large, high percentage of worm castings with no problems. But I don't necessarily recommend you do that. You want to add these things supplementally into your garden bed. So actually, these are the supplements. Let's get into the main components of my soil that I'll be adding in for this upcoming season. First, we have this one right here. This is some biodynamic Demeter listed compost. So this is actually from Sonoma Compost. It's actually called the High Test Biodynamic Compost. So the biodynamic compost, they put in some like tinctures or whatever and do this kind of stuff, and it's actually composted longer than their standard Armory listed organic high test compost. So I like to use this stuff sparingly. I like to use mainly the Mallard Plus, but often I like to mix the Mallard Plus with this, 1-to-1, and that would make an awesome blend. Today, because I am just enriching my beds, I'm using this guy. And this is basically a bacteria-based compost. So this is made at high temperatures, and it has a lot of bacterial matter. Now, to be really good in your garden, besides the bacterial matter, you need the fungal matter, man. So that's what we got next right here. We got some fungal-dominated compost, man, and this is the bomb stuff right here. This, in my opinion, is what most people is missing in their garden, and this is the good stuff, the good shit, man. Nice smell. And this is the Boogie hummus here, and this is basically a wood chip based hummus. So what they did was, as I said, the regular compost is made with the bacterial process with high heat, and it breaks down over time. How this works is this is a fungal dominated compost. So they take literally wood chips and they sit in a pile for months and months and years, and then it basically just composts down and breaks down over time. So this is a low heat process. So the low heat process creates different microorganisms and encourages different microorganisms in this mixture instead of the high heat mixture. So I'm going to add both these together for optimal growing results. So I'll have the fungal dominated and the bacterial based dominated compost. And once again, this is the Boogie hummus. And I haven't seen the testing results from the Boogie hummus yet, but I'm highly confident it is quite active in all the different microbes. Besides just being the soil, and it just plays for the plant to put its roots, and the plant's roots grow between the soil, not through the soil, through the airspace in the soil. It's also going to have a lot of nutrition in the bacterial and fungal microbes that actually make the whole system work, make the plant's roots work. I mean, the plants have been on Earth for millions of years, and they've learned to work in a system of this whole soil microbiology. So besides the soils, I got this last one here. This is also very important. I have been primarily growing in the compost, and I do notice that during the summertime, I do tend to dry out a little bit. So what I usually recommend for people and new gardeners is Mel's Mix. Mel Bartholomew, who got the square foot gardening method going, he recommends basically 1/3 of compost, 1/3 of vermiculite, and 1/3 of coconut coir or peat moss. So what we're going to add in here is a bag of stuff I got. This is basically the coconut coir and some perlite, which is similar but not exactly the same thing as the vermiculite. Also actually is enriched with the rock dust here. So we're just going to go ahead and add this one bag in, and adding just some amounts of coconut coir. I would like to add a lot more, but I don't want to displace too much of the other stuff I'm adding to my beds. It's going to help with the water retention so that my garden doesn't dry out as much in this upcoming summer season. So I know what you might be thinking, John, should I add all those to my garden? Well, you know what? Let me tell you the beneficial ones. The beneficial ones are number one, a compost. You want to try to get a good quality bacterial-based compost, hopefully locally, and also a fungal-dominated compost. Those are the most important. Next, in my opinion, the most important is the rock dust or the azomite. You want to add the trace minerals in there. If you want to stop there, that's great. If you want to keep going, then you probably want to add the coconut coir or the peat moss, and then you want to add the vermiculite. And then that's probably like all you need as baseline. If you want to take it to the next level, then add the worm castings. Then I'd probably add the kelp meal. I mean, each of these different nutrients you're adding in. I mean, literally what I'm going to be doing next is mixing these into my soil, and it's almost like baking a cake, right? If you leave out one ingredient in a cake, it could mess up the whole recipe. This is what I found what really works, and it's only going to help the beneficial microbes. Several of the products are going to populate the microbial and fungal and bacterial action in the soil even more, including these two compost and the microbes and minerals product. And that's what you really want to do. So, you know, I always encourage you guys to do the best you can, but at minimum do the compost, the rock dust, and the worm castings, basically, to sum it up. The other ones, if you got extra money to spend, you know, buy it and try it and see, or wait for my videos when I actually go over the results on some of the John and Bob's products. Now we're going to amend my raised bed. As you can see, I've taken out the irrigation system and kind of draped it over the side temporarily so I can get in here and work this. Because, you know, what I like to do is just layer on all my nutrients and all the different amendments that I'm going to add, and then kind of mix it with my hands, get my hands in the soil. I don't try to use any kind of like spades or shovels or forks or anything in this. I like to just get my hands dirty. Well, I got gloves on. I'm a wuss like that. But anyways, we're just going to mix it all up and layer it on, and then just kind of just mix it and fluff it all in. And then at the end, we're going to make sure it's level with the top so that it has a nice finished look in my garden. You know, for me, if you have a raised bed garden, in my opinion, for the most part, you should always fill it up to the top, because then if you fill it up to the top, there's the most soil and the most different nutrients in the soil that your plants could have that smorgasbord that we want them to have. So first what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add the worm castings. And what I like to do is I just like to take a bucket, and this bucket makes it very convenient to just you know, shake a little bit out over the whole bed, so I can get this stuff evenly distributed. Now we're going to add the kelp meal, and same thing. This bucket here is going to serve like an L part of the bed, so I'm just going to put about half of this stuff in there. Oh, a little bit too much. And I just like to go along and kind of evenly distribute it in the bed. Next, we got the biochar, and on some of these materials, you know, they do tend to clump up, so I like to get my hands in the material with the gloves on and actually just break it up into nice fine particles before you know, spreading it in. And be aware that the carbon or the biochar will definitely stain your hands black, so you might want to wear some gloves for that if you're got to break that up a little bit. So we're just going to go ahead and once again spread this out a little bit in my garden. Next, we got the rock dust. This stuff is a very fine powder you may want to use, and actually I encourage you guys to use like at least a dust mask so that you don't breathe this fine particulate in. Minimally hold your breath, or put a handkerchief over your nose and your mouth while doing this. I'm going to choose to hold my breath today. Can't breathe. All right, after the dust cleared, I can inhale now. Whew. Next thing, we're going to use a second rock dust. Not totally a dust, but a little bit dusty. I'm going to spread this guy out. Next, we got the John and Bob's products. I believe this is the Nourish Biosol. Try this because we don't have a lot. We're just going to go ahead and shake this stuff out. Don't want to shake too much out in here. You need very little of these products here. Next, we got the John and Bob Soil Optimizer. Once again, we're just going to shake this stuff out just a little bit everywhere. Just like baking a cake. Next, we got the microbes and minerals, or maximized by John and Bob's, and I find particularly this stuff tends to clump up a lot. So before we actually dump it in there, I'm just kind of squeezing this up in my hands. This is one of the funnest things I like to do while I have gloves on anyways, is I squeeze these up and just feel the soil, man. Squeeze it up in a nice fine particulate so that it can get more evenly distributed in your soil instead of big, large clods. Did you ever have like, dirt clod fights when you were a kid? We used to have dirt clod fights. We'd find dirt clods and chuck them at other kids. That was not a nice thing to do, but probably everybody does it when they're a kid. So we got this in a fine texture here. We're just gonna once again take it and just kind of sprinkle it daintily throughout my raised bed. So those are all the ingredients that I'll be adding. The main single ingredients I'll be adding. Next, I'm gonna add the 3 bagged products. Now, once again, I want to say this is what I'm using at this time based on like what I have, quote unquote, in stock, or what I have extra bags of. You know, if I only had compost, I would use the compost and the rock dust without anything else. That being said, all these other things may be beneficial for you to use. I mean, once again, my goal is not to be gardening on the frugal. I mean, that's one of my goals, but it's not my highest goal. My highest goal in why I'm growing food is to make nutrient dense food. And so I want to have the highest quality food because in my opinion, the food you eat becomes you. And when you're eating the highest quality food, you're going to be the highest quality person you can be. So I want to have the highest quality health and highest quality everything, and I can only do that by growing my own food, adding all these minerals and different things in my soil because frankly most conventional agriculture, even organic agriculture, is not taking it to the level that I am. Number one, it may be unsustainable adding some of these things in large quantities to fields. Some of these things can be very inexpensive to add. So, I mean, I think every farmer should add minimally like seawater to their drip line or when they're watering. And I definitely think they should also add the rock dust. That alone will make an amazing difference. Plus, then you could use some of the other things like the fungal dominated compost and compost teas that I'm going to add later in the season. So next, let's go ahead and add those bag products. Now we're going to add the coconut coir and perlite. Next, we got the big boys. Here's the high test biodynamic compost. Now, biodynamic compost is actually fairly rare, so I'm lucky that I have a local source. I'm really glad for that. And this gets added in much higher quantities. This is basically going to get added all the way up to top off this whole bed, actually. And now we got the boogie humus. Now, I do want to take a second and talk more about the boogie humus. You know, there was an episode I did a while back at my friend's place, and it was actually, the title of the video is called SuperSize Your Vegetables with Wood Chips and Rock Dust. And my friends in Oregon, all they're growing in is composted wood chips that they've done on their own property. You know, I don't have a large property where I could actually sit and compost wood chips for like 3 years to make this stuff. So I'm getting it from the Boogie Brew company, the Boogie Humus. This is some really good stuff. So we're gonna go ahead and add that stuff in there, and hopefully this will supersize my vegetables along with those trace minerals to get me optimal growth and maybe even optimal girth. Okay, so the main deal is once you got all this added, and I'm probably gonna have to add more, and I'll probably add more later, but just to show you guys, I like to kind of like roll up my sleeves, take my gloves, and what I like to do is take any large big particles like this and just break them up because I don't want big chunks in the soil. So I'll be here with my hand just kind of going through and breaking up any large chunks of stuff. And what I'm doing is basically I'm just, you know, waxing on and waxing off, much like that movie. Wax on, wax off. And I'm just going along the surface, not to disturb the underneath soil layers. And I've never really seen anybody do this, so you don't have to do it like this, but this is just how I like to do it, you know. This is my garden zen meditation, you know. Wax on, wax off. I like waxing off more than I like waxing on. And we're just gonna go ahead and mix all these different amendments all together so we have a nice evenly distributed mixture. And you can see that because all the different rock dust powders have a different color, and then you can see the perlite get mixed in. So definitely really cool. So as you guys can see, I got the soil pretty much filled up, and it's a little bit high. And I do want to, you know, say real quick that the way I do this is just the way I do it. Doesn't mean it's the way you have to do it. Another alternate way to do this was to have a nice large wheelbarrow and mix up all your different soils in there and then fill that on top. I kind of like to get my hands in the soil and mix it all up. Even if I'm mixing something in the wheelbarrow, I prefer to mix it up with my hands instead of using a shovel. I mean, I just like digging in the dirt, much like I'm a kid again. The final step, as you see, it's like all uneven. I really like to have that nice finished look, especially for my front yard garden. Even in my backyard garden, I mean, wherever I'm gardening, I just like it to look nice and neat and tidy, like, you know, Europeans. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what I call Screech. Now, Screech is not the dude that was in Saved by the Bell sitcom thing. It's what I do to my raised bed after it's full. I take like a 2x3, and what we're going to do is we're just going to take this, you know, down and kind of like, I like to run it all the way across the bed, although I have a trellis in here. And I just take it and I just squeegee it across the top so that I can make sure the top is completely level and all the soil is level. It gives you that nice and finished look. I'm gonna go ahead and screech the top of my bed to make the soil level, and I'll be back at you in a minute. So now you guys could see that I got this all screeched out, and I got my irrigation drip system back on top. And one of the things I really like is actually the subsoil irrigation system that I'm hopefully test real soon. With that system, you don't gotta just move all the irrigation stuff, and you have the flexibility of being able to freely plant wherever you really want due to the wicking action it has. Now, I know you guys might be thinking, especially you country gardeners, John, why the hell are you screeching your bed, making it look all pretty? I mean, this is literally at the sidewalk in the front of my house. I mean, I want this to look nice and pretty and neat for me, and for people that come over and look at it, and for just people driving by. If I did live in the country and had 40 acres and had no neighbors and I didn't really care, I'd probably just do close enough job and just leave it. But it's in my front yard, and I'm going to be looking at it a lot, and just kind of like OCD like that. I guess the last step I like to do is always take my hose, and I like to spray this down evenly with water, and prep this bed and get it ready for the new plants that are going in. The soil is actually particularly dry, and I find that if the soil has been dry for a long time, the water tends to run off instead of soak in. So I want to get the soil, the water actually soaking in the soil, and so that when I do plant the starts, it doesn't run off, it soaks in much better. Once the soil does get wet, it tends to hold the water better than when it's fully dry and it kind of just runs off. All right, so we wetted it down enough, and I mean, that's pretty much it. Now we're all ready to plant out for the new season. So for those of you guys that was wondering, that's how I enrich my bed. I use a lot of different things. Now, you don't necessarily need to use all these things for great gardening results. If you just get some bag compost and start growing in it, you're going to be doing great. But if you want to improve, and I always live my life by a principle called CANI, C-A-N-I, stands for constant and never-ending improvement. And I want to always improve what I'm doing and just make it that much better. And if it means I got to spend a little bit of extra money and some things to add to my soil to make it that much better so I can have more nutritious produce, I'm going to definitely do it. That being said, you need to figure out where you're at. At bare minimum, I'd recommend compost and the rock dust. And then, then from there you could add in the vermiculite and the coconut coir, peat moss, and then the worm castings. And you might feel comfortable stopping there, or adding different varieties of rock dust even, and getting more crazy like I do. Hope this sheds a little bit of light on what I do to enrich my raised beds after each growing season, and some of the things I use. Of course, it may vary depending on, what I have in stock. I have used other things like zeolites and all kinds of different things in the past, but these are some of the basic things that I generally always use. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and it was quite enriching to you like it was enriching to my raised bed. Once again, my name is John Kohler with growingyourgreens.com. We'll see you next time, and remember, keep on growing.